Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds, Edge to Edge Transformation. And speaking of transformation, one person I got to know in the process was Stephen Feinberg. He had a transformative effect on my life, even though we probably discussed only a few hours here and there. And he has been a coach to many executives and teams in the technology industry and outside of it. Stephen, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up becoming the person I've known over the years now?
It's a long story that I'll try to encapsulate. But like I grew up sleeping on a fire escape, and now I'm a neuro-strategist. So how did I get from fire escape to neurostrategy? For this, I have to introduce you to my dad. When you're looking at me, what do you think he did for a living, Shankar? Accountant, lawyer, male model. He was actually a big time bookie in New York in 1950s to 1980. Not the type that reads books. So people understand a bookie makes odds and takes bets. In one game, sports game, was sports betting. In one game, he lost 10 large, that's $10,000 on bookie parlance, $95,000 in today's currency. But by the end of the day, he actually won it all back and won more. So every single day, instability. I felt out of control. And in reality, though, it was a masterclass in knowing how to handle and mishandle uncertainty. And so there's more to that. Executives, leaders, and everyday folks are dealing with uncertainty more. It's accelerated, the levels of it, the ambiguity, the uncertainty, the velocity at which we have to try to make decisions and handle risks. Well, that was my everyday growing up life. But there's a way to do it. It's not about gambling secrets. That's not what we're going to talk about, but how to be able to make effective decisions, how to influence under uncertainty, how to connect with others during uncertainty, how to navigate this disruptive world that we all find ourselves in. I read a lot that people say, we live in uncertain times. And I went, well, isn't that the way it's always been? For me, you never knew what was going to happen. That's not to say that my family wasn't close-knit or that there wasn't a lot of love, right? My mom and dad, always felt loved, and there was a lot of caring, a lot of concern. It was just that it was in the midst of this world that constantly was moving about.
Wow, now I know why you're able to help many of us deal with fires. You stayed or you lived in a fire escape. So you know how to escape fires, huh?
That's right. That's right. In fact, so I slept out on the fire escape, right? And from that fire escape, I would look out onto the street. Terry, my wife, always says, make sure you tell people they didn't leave you out there in the cold and the rain and the snow. They always brought me in. It's just that we didn't have a big enough place, because at one point we moved back in with my grandparents. The apartment building was a 3-room flat, like a railroad. And so there were different family members who slept in different locations there at the time when I was very young. And so they would put me out on the fire escape. And from there, I could hear a lot of action on the streets. And I always wanted to know, what's the game? What's going on? And so my work is a lot about how to navigate the game board with high stakes challenges and uncertainty.
You've given several talks and written books on these kinds of themes. And I see in your background something very interesting. Do what others say can be done. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, well, that's my latest book is exactly titled, Do What Others Say Can Be Done, Play the Metagame. It's about, I interviewed world-class leaders, entrepreneurs, and creators about how to create the exceptional. And the people in the book include Apple's CEO, Gil Amelio. I interviewed him, a wonderful man, by the way, very gracious in his time and his willingness to talk about his experience and how he helped Apple solve its very complex and very urgent problems when he was brought on, the vice president of eBay, Steve Wesley. He's now VC. I interviewed the head of the safest city in America 3 times running, the chief of police there. I interviewed street protesters. I interviewed the person who won the California Teacher of the Year award, ambassadors for the United States in the Obama administration, some people who were in the Treasury during the 2008 disruptive economic turn down, the meltdown, the Great Recession, teachers, regular folks, how they created exceptional outcomes. Because what I was really interested in was, how do you be great when uncertainty strikes? How do you be great in high stakes challenges? And that's what the gist of the book is all about. I asked each of the individuals, what do they believe is the number one foe of leaders? And your answer was very distinctive. You said myopia, that we get too narrow in our view of things. You actually gave an example about your own myopic views at times, which I think is a great, the people who create the exceptional are willing to look at themselves in the mirror, are willing to say, where are my blind spots? Where am I myopic? What am I not seeing? And how is it generated from within me as much as the world at large, right? Because the power is in those patterns, is seeing patterns. I look at patterns and how patterns shape reality, shape our experience. I say, the better patterns you see, the better predictions you can make.
I think your work is exceptionally amazing because it helps people to get a 360-degree view of what it is like to be a good leader. You've interviewed all kinds of people. You've interviewed people for, I think, decades, and you've given talks in boardrooms. In what ways has that changed your own life?
Well, fire escape to boardroom, it's a really different world. It's a very different world, I oftentimes say to my wife, Terry, like, we have a beautiful house now and a beautiful backyard, and, looking out on the street, on the busy New York street from the fire escape is quite different from looking out the backyard where we have green spruce and water features and all this stuff. And I went, this is a different reality for me, right? And I go, I like this, this is comforting. It soothes my soul. Being able to influence people, to be able to help people, senior executives, leaders, entrepreneurs. I'd say I want to advance civilization one leader at a time. Being able to help them individually raise their game and be able to move forward. Some people have asked me, what does your big time bookie dad have to do with CEOs, Apple, LinkedIn, executives, folks like yourself? What does your dad have in common with that? And I say, every single one of them are what I call first adapters, not first adopter. A first adapter is someone who usually, uses technology first, is the first to use new technology. And you usually find them outside Apple stores in sleeping bags. In contrast, a first adapter is someone who spots high leverage patterns, detects high leverage patterns to make game-changing, game-winning decisions, right? Like Oprah and Richard Branson, they're able to connect deeper dots so that they can be able to construct more meaning in what they see, have more mastery over their situation, and let's be honest, make more money. So this capacity to spot what I call the hidden game of patterns, the meta game, allows you to have more meaning, more mastery, and more money. And so, to the question, how's it changed my life? Well, those three things are what I'm doing with I live my work, fortunately. Some people say, you don't want to live your work. Well, I actually like what I do. I'm semi-retired, but I like what I do, so I continue to do it. And it's like wherever you go, there you are. There's your patterns. So it's always to spot the strategic is to have this first adaptive view of the world. There are three elements that make up a first adaptive. Number one thing that first adapters do is they have strategic agility. Strategic agility is like a Swiss Army knife in the ability to see what's missing, to take favorable action in your behalf, and to be able to influence others. And in order to do that, it consists of three things. The three things that I found in each of, and I describe more in detail in the book, but what the three things are is that they are game spotting. So that, like Sherlock Holmes, they spot the game. They look at the game board to be able to spot the game and decode that game and be able to see what's going on. You have to be able to see the game board, the field of play. The second is they're able to pattern busting. Once you know what the pattern is, right, you can, using your pattern recognition skills and refining those skills, but once you're able to recognize what the pattern is, you have to be able to bust the pattern if it's not working. They are like Serena Williams. They defy expectations, right? So first adapters are defying expectations. That's an orientation that they have. And the third thing that they're able to do is frame setting. They're able to set the frame to influence others, like Mahatma Gandhi influenced others, right? So basically, game spotting, pattern busting, and frame setting in order to have this maneuverability, the strategic agility to adapt and respond skillfully.
So you've been doing this work for at least 3 decades.
4 decades. I'd say 4 decades.
Wow. And we've had a decadence of technologies come and go through these 4 decades. Have you seen a change in the pace of change? Like, for example, the way internet came and went, and now we've got social media, and now we've got AI, machine learning, metaverse. Speaking of the meta game, so much is changing right in front of our eyes. First, is the pace increased? Secondly, in what ways is it affecting us? And thirdly, how can one have that strategic agility, as you call it, to be able to continue working through this?
So the answer to the first question is yes, it's accelerating. In my world, everything was always fast, like emotionally, the unknown and what's happening, and the numbers coming in and out. I'm actually privileged to be able to experience the speed, like when you become a master at something, time slows down, right? And you're able, like in sports, they're able to see the game better, right? So by understanding uncertainty, time slows down, even though it's going really fast on the outside. It's like being in the flow state, what you would talk about. So being able to make that shift to go, what are the driving forces that are really at play here? To some of your question, I don't remember if I recall all three of the questions, so help me. But being able to identify what's the rule in your head that's driving you, right? So we have rules. There are rules on the game board. A game is a pattern of interactions, a story with players on a game board that has rules, threats, and rewards. So one of the things I'm always looking at is, so what are the rules? What's the threats? And what are the rewards here? Right. And so you look at what's the incentive structures, right? Inside of an organization, you can look at incentive structures that are driving behavior. And it's usually the structures shape behavior, and they outside of people's awareness, these structures are shaping our behavior. So we have structures in our brain that are driving behaviors, rules. Structure is another way of describing rules. And in organizations, we have structures, like, and by structure, I don't mean the org chart, but what's driving the behavior in the organization? What are the forces at play? What are the objectives that have two people? How is it possible that two people who outside of work can be very friendly, but they go into work and now they're adversaries, right? They were at a different company and they were friends, and all of a sudden they're put in this company and now they're adversaries. Well, the structures, the incentive structures have put these people at odds with each other, unfortunately. Or even if the structures in their rules in their head, they listen to other people's, like someone might say, you don't have the experience to do this, or you've been out of work and you don't know what how can you possibly be up to date? And so it's that the rule in their head is that they don't see the full scope of what's been accomplished in that period of time. So the story that we tell ourselves isn't often, we want to make sure those stories are powerful stories, not disempowering, right?
When I came back after a 6-year sabbatical, that was the thing I heard every time. Every time I talked to someone, oh, you're out of date, 6 years, and you're a dinosaur. And I remember having that discussion with you. You reminded me all the things I had learned during those 6 years of traveling through the jungles, traveling through desert lands, and working with people from everywhere, and how I was no longer just a techie entrepreneur, but a human being with variety of skills.
In fact, you were better.
Yes,
You were more useful for the corporate structure that you were going to go into. So you were listening to false stories, right?
True.
Listening to a story and taking that on as if true, right? So the rule in your head was counterproductive. And so you were, in that case, you were myopic, listening to their false story and minimizing story, rather than when I was looking at it, I went, wow, look at all these great things, added strategic capacity that you now have to read the strategic game board that other people would only be myopic about, would not understand the far-ranging experiences that you had and how they came to be of value, ultimately is of contributing value to the entity, to the enterprise.
That reminds me of something that's happening, which is on one side very positive, on the other side very myopic, which is the abundance of data. Today, anytime people have to take a decision, there's this tons of data they get. Customer data, vendor data, data on the market, and it almost looks like numbers drive decisions. Probably bookies do that too now. There's so much data, right? But there's something inherently myopic about just letting data drive decisions. Can you get into that? I mean, what's the human element in decision making today?
Well, I was listening to Reid Hoffman the other day, talking about AI. Most people think it's artificial intelligence, and it's all this data, right? And it's generating data. And he said, AI is really amplifying intelligence, right? And so the purpose of this AI and this data is to amplify our intelligence, not to be determinative about, not to be in the driver's seat, but to amplify our capacity. Just what's unique about us, one of the things of humans is their ability to use tools, right? And so we extended ourselves in the world. We had different tools, the pitch, the shovels and wheels and lenses and microscopes and telescopes. We extend out into the world, right? That's amplified our experience, but it's still our human brain that's operating. It's how do we, adapt? There's so much data, it's making it hard for people to adapt. And one of the things when I say gaming out is to be able to digitally think about things. So to digitally think about things might be something's either going to be acceptable or unacceptable. At the end of the day, what I call do the strategic math, something you game it out and say, is this going to be better? Is it going to be the same or worse? Is it going to accelerate us? Is it going to be the same, or we're going to be slower? Right. So the data itself needs to be put in a framework that enables you to game out what that data means, because otherwise it's just vast amounts of dots and dashes. Our brains are always what I call sense-making guidance systems, right? We're trying to make sense of all this data. And there's three elements that I found that I talk about in the book to generate internal guidance system. So the guidance system is comprised of three elements, right? It's the ability to predict. Our brains are always predicting. That's the pattern generate, pattern seek. So we're always predicting, we're looking at expectations. Our brains want novelty, right? So it's coming up with new ways of understanding, or when you encounter uncertainty, you might want to have either a known way or a novel way to deal with that uncertainty. And the third element is meaning. So we're always making meaning of things. And so there's this intersection of prediction, novelty, and meaning that affects our guidance system. And our capacity for dealing with uncertainty has to do with those three elements: prediction, novelty, and meaning. My experience of working with people and my own life is I want to raise my guidance system to deal with the levels of complexity, the level of uncertainty, the level of ambiguity, the level of speed that I have to deal with. The better refined my guidance system is, the more skilled decisions I make, the more able I am to influence the outcomes in my world and raise all ships if I want to advance civilization.
One of the things I found in my own life is that there was a time when I was optimizing for revenues and profits. Then a point in time came when I was optimizing for free time to do the things I wanted to do. And now I'm looking at how to make meaning or having meaningful contributions. So the optimization criteria can change over time, right?
Right. That optimization criteria are the rules of the guidance system.
Okay.
Right? So this is going to guide you if you put in revenue and profitability. That's the lens. You put in free time, the game changes, the game board changes, right? If you put in meaning, and then you can refine what you mean by meaning, like what's meaningful. One of the things I used to ask at the end of teaching at the university for 30 plus years, or different universities, at the end of class, I'd ask each student to tell me what their muse was. The M-U-S-E. And by muse, I meant what's M for meaning, what's meaningful, what was meaningful about what we talked about today. U, what was useful about what we talked about today. S, what was surprising about what we talked about today. Or E, what was engaging about what we talked about today. And in the beginning, people went, oh, that's amusing, to do that. I said, no, you're going to have to do it. You don't get out of the class until you give me your answers. So I think that's important. It's like to go, what's your muse for the day? What was meaningful, useful, surprising, or engaging? And I did that with the executives when I was consulting to Apple with the data centers there. I would ask them, we were doing something there. I said, so what's your muse for the day? And, at first they go, oh, God. But it's like, what are we here for, right? It's like, that's what we're having these conversations for, to advance things, to move things forward. So could have been meaning, I figure out I realized that guy over there is not a jerk. I went, wow, that's a big, and so what were the implications of that? We can work together and go faster. Well, that's good.
That's true. At different stages in life, we have different things that wake us up to look at things differently. Is there one thing that strikes you as having had the most impact on humans in terms of technology or in terms of social change in the last a few decades? What muse did you find the most amazing muses in the last decade or two?
I love that question. And they especially love it because I don't have a preset answer to it. The reason why I wrote the book about do what others say can't be done is in every situation, there's the what's seen and the unseen, right? What's known and what's unknown. And every story has that also. Every good story has that also. And so for me, it was to be able to see that there's actually this game that we're all playing. We don't realize, I don't mean game in a dismissive sense in a board game, but there's different levels of the game of our life. And to see these different factors, to see how they come to decisions about things. You know, we have this horrible, tragic situation in Israel and with the Palestinians, and we see this AI, you know, people are saying it's the end of time, the end of humans, right? It's like how people construct sense, you know, about what's going on and what decisions they make have life consequences, life and death consequences for some people. I think this AI is challenging our identity, right? And I think at the level of identity, games reveal our identity, right? On all identities. And by unpacking that, you can see your consciousness. What do you identify with? What's your consciousness? What's the consciousness in relationship to the facts that are thrown at you? I mean, in that way, uncertainty, like in my family, you know, and the average income, the yearly income at the time was just under $6,000 a year. And here, my dad made bets that were $95,000 in a single game, right? And it's like, whoa, you know, it's like the speed of the magnitude of that, you know, and then he lived a robust life. I mean, money came and went, right? And so how do you live your life like that? So I think I'm shaped by that experience. And like I said, it was a masterclass of handling and mishandling uncertainty. And so I think the level of uncertainty that people live with now, with the technology, we can see the consequences of things, the truths and the falsehoods blasted out to us, right? 24/7. These horrible scenes of these innocent people on both sides. Injures, you know, it's like, oh, it's heartbreaking. And yet you have to understand, step back and understand what's the game that's being played? What was the trap that was being set up? How do people respond? How do leaders lead with high levels of uncertainty and do it skillfully and keep their hearts open at the same time? Bring their humanity to the decisions. It's tough. I don't know if I've answered your question, but I didn't have a full scope answer.
I think so, because it's such a nuanced thing. There are no simple good, bad, right, wrong answers. It's not a digital thing, which reminds me the availability of information has also led to the availability of misinformation, as you said. And we've seen that consistently in the last few elections, not only in the United States, but around the world. The kind of misinformation that has been spreading, do you think we'll be able to solve that problem and get to more meaningful information over time?
Well, truth matters. The misinformation that people are willing to be duped is shocking to me. Shocking how duped they are. I went to see The Godfather, the movie The Godfather, one of the greatest movies of all time. I went to the movie with my dad and another friend of his that he grew up with, who happened to be a bag man for the mafia. Now, my dad was not in the mafia. He was a good man, but he was in the gambling world. So we're at the movie with my dad and the bag man, who happened to be a former cop, right? And now he's collecting money. Like, this is really underworld stuff, right? He's collecting money for the mafia. And as we're walking out, we watched the movie, amazing. And a little old lady, she said, "There's no such thing as the mafia." And I looked at her, and I looked at this guy standing next to my dad, and I looked at her, and I looked, how is it that people don't know what's really going on? So that effect, that was like another kind of shocker, in some ways, that truth matters, that seeing reality matters, and especially matters in the context of elections, and especially matters in political decisions that are going to be made, and the consequences. And remember, I said the games are one of the elements of deception, right? And so it's a game that's being played, and it's shocking to me that this game is allowed, that people, regular folks, are duped. It's shocking.
Speaking of games and deception, when young people come into this world, it's quite natural to be cynical, right? How can they move beyond cynicism? How should people approach their lives and their careers in
I think
this dynamic world today?
in my book, I had a quote. My son-in-law runs with my daughter, runs a company called Wayfinder, and they bring purpose into schools, and they have the kids find what their purpose is and identify that for themselves, what's meaningful in their lives. And I think that that's a central piece. But he put up a quote from the book that winning requires meaning and purpose in order for it to be worth doing, right? Because you could go after winning, but you could make mistakes and do bad things just to win. Like I won, screw the other person,
Yeah.
right, kind of thing. But when you have purpose attached to it and meaning, then you can win. You could go for it, right? You step on the accelerator, you go for what you want. So I think people underestimate adolescents and teenagers and young people, is they want something meaningful. They want to do what's right. My dad always said to me, as much as I came from this kind of off the beaten track, he always told me, do the right thing. And so that was a guidance, that was a rule, do the right thing. And I always would go, well, what's the right thing here? We said, well, that's what you got to figure out. Do the right thing, which spoke to my soul. It's like when I work with someone, if I'm working individually with someone, I'm always concerned about giving them the right advice, not perfect advice, but being right. So if I think I have to frame the future, I think into the future about the consequences of how this decision is going to affect them through time, right? And so that's another thing, is people just begin to extend through time as best you can, and as far forward as you can, is to consider what are the consequences of this action? Where's this going? Where's this leading us to? And it's like, if you look at this Israeli-Palestinian, the Hamas is horrible thing that they did. But in my opinion, it was a trap. It's a trap because they want the Israelis to go in and destroy Gaza, to make the Israelis look even worse than what the situation, and they've just bitten it off, terribly. I mean, I'm very strong in favor of the Israelis' right to exist and live peacefully. But it's, when you look at these people who were murdered, who's killed and savagely, a lot of those people were actually what would be called the peaceniks. They were the people who were trying to make peace with the Gazan, the Palestinians, right? So you have to look at the players and look at what's going on, and it's so difficult. My heart goes out to the innocent people on both sides. But to me, it's the extremes. The careful is you got to watch the extremes. We can't let both those groups dictate what the rest of us are going to live by. And it's not easy to keep your heart open in the middle of those things and to realize there are good people, decent people. There are decent Palestinians, there are decent Israelis, there are decent people along the world. And I'm not saying there aren't bad people, but it's like, let's call the bad people and call it out and we can know the difference between good and bad and truth.
One would have thought with all the smarts that we have, access to data, access to tools and automation, much better way of making food and all that, we would put our energy into sustainability and making life even better. Instead, we're back into war games, and it's not just one war. There are simultaneously 4 or 5 wars being done. What's happening to humanity? Apart from the politics, what is it? Are we missing something?
The humanity is being perturbated. You know that expression?
No.
Perturbation is a scientific meaning. It's being pulsed, energy is being pulsed into the system. So from a system point of view, the system is there to maintain itself, but it's getting perturbated, right? These wars, is all this horrors, and the new technology is perturbating the existing way. And it's going to either take us to a higher order of functioning, or it's going to diminish and dissolve. So we're at an inflection point, right? As it's like the capacity to manage those things, the new energy that's coming, the information, the level of information, the level of this violence that's going on is, it's always the case for humanity to, and the leadership, to either rise to a new higher order of functioning or to dissolve into horror shows, right? And so it looks like we have both sides at odds and contenders for who's going to get in the driver's seat. The evolution is that when something new comes in, the status quo gets shaken up, right? And some people want status quo ante. They want to go back to before the way it was. Not even the status quo, they just want to go back to before, but it never existed. You know, they just want some peace and quiet and calm and, you know, walk in nature. You know, it's not available for everybody. There are a lot of people who technologically, socially, and community-wise are striving to make a better world. And I think that that's an impulse in humanity. There's a story about this challenge that we all have. And his story goes, upon hearing of his grandson's problem, an old Cherokee told his grandson, there's a battle between two wolves inside of us. One is evil, it's anger, jealousy, greed, fear-driven, lies, inferiority. The other is good, it's joy, peace, kindness, humility, love, empathy, and truth. The young boy thought about it, and then he asked his grandfather, he said, grandfather, which wolf wins? The grandfather quietly replies, the one you feed. And I think that that's so essential to the question that you're asking us. In terms of our capacity to be generative, to be a force of creating rather than a destructive force. It's easy to take buildings down. It takes another level of consciousness to create, to be generative. You know, when I was an undergraduate, my degree was in psychology, and one of the things that I read about and I did research on how people develop through time and over time. And there was one philosopher, one psychologist named Erik Erikson, and he was about the psychosocial development of humans. And at each stage, there was a crisis that we encountered and how we dealt with it. You know, young people have an identity crisis. When you're either going to form an identity, a strong identity, and move forward, or you put it off, or you don't foreclose on what your parents or grandparents were, and you just live their life basically with that identity. But as you progress through time, as you go into beyond your identity, beyond the next level is intimacy, about that. You have a relationship. There's another place where we move towards what we refer to as seniors. In that point, the crisis that we all feel is either a crisis of generativity to create the future for the future generations, or stagnation. And you usually hear about people being a crotchety, cantankerous old man or a woman or something like that, always complaining. Well, those people are stagnating. Whereas the people who are generative, who are focused on creating the future, or I'm leaving a better future for the future generations, they answer that question. That's what they're feeding the wolf inside of themselves. When I first heard that, I was early 20s, and I went, when that time comes in the future, I want to have identified with being generative. And it's not easy. Your body starts falling apart, you have pains. So instead of allowing the circumstances to determine your experience and your emotions and what you're going to do, you have this internal drive. Your consciousness determines what you're going to do. Now, it all could be make-believe, but it's certainly worth doing, in my opinion.
We're no longer talking about just generative artificial intelligence or Gen AI. We're talking about generative human intelligence, or what we humans can do for the next generation. That's amazing.
Perfect. Exactly.
In fact, you and I met at Project Happiness, where we were talking about how happiness is not just pleasure, it's not just doing things that give us immediate, instant gratification, but something more meaningful. And I think a lot of that work came out of the clarity that most of the time we are striving for what is good for everybody. Mothers take care of children, and good entrepreneurs take care of their customers and vendors and so on. So, and that was a very good and optimistic picture. Right now, it's looking a little challenging because of all the activities around the world. But do you think long term there's hope that people will prevail and will feed the good wolf and not just the craziness around it?
Yes, you don't write a book called Do What Others Say Can't Be Done if you don't believe that there will survive and thrive. But it won't come by happenstance. There's an argument that it's one big dice game. But I also heard God doesn't play dice. As long as I'm around, I'm going to try to make it right. In summary, I believe that fortune favors first adapters. And so the intent is, as a first adapter, you're responsive and generative in the way you approach things. If people want to know more, on my website, stephenfeinberg.com, there is an assessment instrument. It's called the First Adapter Scorecard. And it takes 3 minutes to fill it out. There's 9 questions. And in it, it evaluates your first adapter skill set along game spotting, pattern busting, frame setting. And it gives you a score, and it will send it to you for free to help advance your abilities as a first adapter, because patterns are destiny. And what I like to say is choose wisely, don't wobble.
Well, Stephen, it's always a joy talking to you. And I've always learned something new. And this time I learned about how we can keep that agility, how we can continue marching forward, how we can make sense out of all the wars and the situations that are presented to us. And as we go through different stages in life, how we can actually continue to look for meaning and have generative human intelligence. Thank you for that. And to people listening out there, I'm always looking for divergent views, different ways of looking at the truth. It's very tempting to think that AI will solve all the problems and we'll be just drinking beer. I don't think that's going to happen, not in our lifetime. So instead, let's focus on how we can co-create a future together. And please come forward. I would love to hear your stories. I would love to know what makes you tick in this day and age and how we can create a better future.
Thank you. I enjoyed this.